I'm just going to tell you a bit about this particular piece. It's one of my favourites. It's an existentialist piece. There's a fair amount of philosophy in it. It looks, interesting in itself, but the concept behind it is really what drives the essence of it. It's called Nowhere Man, Now Here, and nowhere and now here are the same word, only separated out by a space. So it's a comment on our concept of our existence and what we think we're doing in our lives and so on. It took about 4 years to conceive and to finalise, and only was really finished in the last couple of months. What I'm going to do is go through the various elements of this to try and help you understand what I was trying to achieve with it and what the statement is, what statements are being made. What we'll do is we'll start from the bottom and work our way upwards so that we actually get a good understanding of the main features of the sculpture. And so therefore we'll focus at this very beginning at the base of the sculpture. This particular piece is sitting on a spinner, and the spinner has a spiral in it, and that spiral represents the paths in our life, where we think we are following a linear pattern, but essentially we keep on going round and round in circles and then spiraling back to the moment, which is now, and it's always now, and that's why it's called Now Here. We are nowhere, but we are always here at the same time. So in relation to that, the spinner takes a step back to that circle, that center point. And in relation to time, that represents the moment now. And we can never experience anything but the now, even though we perceive the past and the future. And that even experiencing the now is a bit misleading, because by the time we realize what we perceive to be the now, by the time we realize that, it's actually the past. So we're only perceiving the past. We can never really perceive the now. We are living through the now through the lens of the past or perception of the future. The metal pieces and the watch. The metal pieces represent question marks, and in some ways that represents the questioning of what we do, we're trying to achieve in our lives, where we're going, what we're doing. And as part of that spiraling process, we keep on questioning and trying to understand what we're trying to achieve and who we are as part of that process at any given moment. And that given moment is represented by the watch. The watch represents that moment in time we are always experiencing. We perceive again what might be the future, what might be the past, and so on, but we are only ever living that moment, and our perception of ourselves and the world is based on that moment. So therefore, once that, in relation to that spiral, we're spiraling back into that point in time, which is just the now. So now I'd like to concentrate on the copper piping. Now the copper piping represents the paths in our lives, the convoluted paths that we take, the ups and downs, the rounds and roundabouts, and the sudden stops of our lives. That whether that be in terms of a career or in terms of just life's natural paths and so on, or the events that we experience. Now the piping also represents the visceral nature of our existence, and so therefore it has a representation of in the intestines, the gut feelings that we experience of life and so on, and what we make of it. And we work along those with those gut feelings to be able to say what the meanings of our world are, as well as how it all relates to the essence of what we do and how we relate to the world and other people. Right. This feature represents the people in our lives, the people we love, everyone that we experience. We seem to think we know the people in one way or another, but essentially we only ever know an outline of them, an impression of who they are. And therefore we're regularly surprised when someone that we know does something different, and we say, oh, that's not like them. But really it is them. It's just our perception of who we think they are, and we've not experienced them previously in that way. So people don't change. We just see different elements of them when they come through, and the more we get to know them and so on. So essentially we only ever see an outline, an impression of the people we think we know in our lives. Sunglasses represents what we think we perceive in the world, what we think we see. We think we see a reality, but that reality is never clear. It's always affected by some lens that we perceive in our lives, or we have that drives our understanding of the world. So therefore we never really see clearly. It's always through some sort of filter in one way or another. So therefore the sunglasses represent that filtering of the world, or what we perceive to be reality. In relation to, we were just speaking about the sunglasses, and how our vision or perception of reality is actually not real. The monocle represents how we think we are focused on the world, but essentially we're very one-eyed, so we only ever see the world in one particular way, the way that we experience it, and therefore we're never really experiencing anything other than what we perceive to be reality, which is not necessarily the reality of others and or what's actually out there. It's attached to the question mark, again, questioning what we perceive to be the world, but it also represents the ear. So what we see and what we hear speak to each other, and we only understand the world in relation to those two senses at the same time. But whatever we understand is always tenuous. It's always pinned together by the most tenuous bits of understanding and so on. So therefore, we're never really sure, even though we think we may be absolutely certain, but it's always a tenuous connection. The next element I'd like to focus on is this lovely shape here. I had a bit of a struggle with that because my original intention was to try and put it in a position where you'd only ever see it as a square. However, that would be dependent on how tall someone is and so on, so that would be nigh impossible to achieve. So therefore I decided it's just more interesting to leave it as it is, simply because the message will get across, or the intended message will get across anyway. So in essence, at any one moment, we think we're perceiving a direction or a frame that we're working within and so on. But it just takes the slightest move from that frame and we find that we're no longer going in that set direction. We are then taken off to another direction and so on. And life becomes very, very different to what we perceived we were trying to achieve. Embedded as part of that message is this compass and mirror. Now, the compass relates to the message of we think we are taking a path and we have a direction and we have a set goal that we wish to achieve and so on. And the compass needle point is pointing towards that. However, it doesn't take much for us to be distracted. A magnet or some other interest factor comes along, and suddenly we find that compass has changed and we've changed direction. Even without realizing that it happens. So that compass then represents the fact that we have some idea of direction, but we're never going to be sure that the direction is going to be where we are going, and can never be sure of the fact that something else is not going to come along and change our direction. Associated with the compass is the mirror. Now the mirror is again what we perceive to be a reflection of life and so on, and of ourselves. However, the mirror is exactly that, just a reflection. It's only what we perceive to be the reality of the world that we see, and it's often distorted. So mirrors do distort the way we see the world. They give us a different way of seeing the world, but never actually tells us about reality, other than the reality that we perceive to be the real. This component represents a relationship to the elements of time that I previously mentioned, as well as the concepts of our reality and the setting of direction. And in essence, our perception of time is often very distorted and unreal, and what we think may be a norm, or may actually be a simple part of our lives, being able to find at what time we are doing what. Time is really totally irrelevant, because we construct the meaning and value of time at each given moment. So therefore this piece is a deconstructed elements of timepieces, and with time being what we want to achieve, how we actually perceive the moment, how we actually perceive the future and the past, and how it all is momentary. So the sand dial feature actually is inverted, so that, you know, each moment is just stopped again, and that again refers to the fact that we're spiraling back to that one point all the time and never really moving anywhere. The components that we see here again are representations of you know, our sense of perception. So this particular piece again represents the ear, how we perceive hearing things, and what we take on board as part of our sense of reality and our sense of meaning and context in life. Again, it's tenuous depending on how we perceive the world. So what we think we hear stuff, and that informs us about the world, but essentially the inverse also applies, saying that what we understand of the world affects how and what we hear of it, and so on. And again, it's very tenuous depending on the conditions that we may be in. That's followed by this particular piece here at the top, which is trying to then represent our perception, being able to look into the future, understand what that happens to be, but that's all often cluttered by what we perceive in our lives and what we understand in our lives. So we can never tell what a future might be, because it's always cluttered and confused by the elements that create our lives. So the future, our context, is really never knowable and never going to make sense to anyone but yourself, because you're constructing that reality. Also, the future is always tied to the past. It's part of an element that we can never get away from, and therefore trying to understand the future is only understandable through the past, and they are a set connection. And the hat tends to tie the two together, because it represents fashion of the past, elements of the past, but it also caps the way we feel about the world, we understand the world. And so we have a cap on our understanding of what the future might hold and our opportunities that are available to us. This feature is the most recent addition, and it's the final segment of it. Now, as part of this whole thing, I was relating to the world in the way we experience it and so on, but at times we can't make sense of the world, and therefore what we try to do is try to project into the universe, into aspects of spirituality, of religion, of you know, connection with something beyond ourselves and so on. So I used this particular piece, and it was the last piece that came in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I put the question mark there because we're questioning the nature of our existence, and who we are and what we are in the universe and so on. So we're always looking for connection. We're radiating out, trying to communicate, trying to find a sense of ability to actually get sense of meaning, trying to look for connection. And unfortunately, most of the time, there is no connection. As you can see, this particular piece has, you know, a multitude of meanings and a multitude of contexts, all relating to our sense of self and the perception of who we are, how we relate to the world, how we actually then also make meaning in the process. Even though it may seem a wee bit bleak, it's also very exciting, because it means that we can now affect the way we perceive ourselves in this moment in time, and be able to move forward positively, understanding the elements of ourselves and understanding how we can actually affect a better outcome. So again, this is one of my favorite pieces, and I really enjoy the journey that it's taken me through, and it's constantly reminding me of my own particular perceptions of where I'm going, or concepts of what I'm doing. So thank you for joining me and trying to help you understand this particular piece. It's one, as I said, it's one of my favorite, and it really sort of helps me keep a focus on what are the important things in life, and how it really works towards being able to find a direction or understand the nature of what I'm doing at any particular moment.